Thank you everyone for joining us for our webinar today on Painless Presents. My name is Marissa. I'll be the background person today. I'll be handling the Q&A and kind of just answering things as needed in the background. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn you over to Katie and Roy, who are going to be our presenters today.
Thanks, Marissa. Welcome everyone to the Mathnasium webinar, Painless Presents. My name is Katie and I'm the Center Director of the Mathnasium of Reston.
My name is Roy and I'm the Center Director of the Mathnasium in Mount Vernon. Hi guys. So we've got a question for you guys. We're going to put up a poll for you. The question is, do you feel comfortable answering a math problem if percents are involved?
Marissa, are you able to give us the percentage for each of them, please?
I can. So we're at 78% yes and 22% no.
Excellent. Well, that is completely okay. We are going to go into a lot of detail today about percents, but we just want to start off by kind of going over where do we see percents, how do we see percents, and how do we take that information that we're going to learn today and apply it to real world. So there are a couple of different ways that we see percents. Some of them could be in shopping. When we go to Target and there's a deal, something could be 20% off. Or when we pay for something, there's a sales tax involved, and that's a certain percentage as well. When we go to a restaurant, we might be tipping that waiter a certain percentage, sometimes 15%, sometimes 20%. How do we find that calculation? When we do our taxes, our parents do their taxes, or if we are a parent and filing our own taxes, we will sometimes see percentages there. Grades in school, the percentage correct. So if we have a test, we're doing the grade is based off of a percentage of the problems answered correctly. Food labels, so percentage of carbohydrates that might be in something, or sodium, or even sugar or fat, that also includes percents. And then investments as well, which is usually leaning more towards us adults, but sometimes students will see them as well.
So in order to understand percents, there's a couple of steps that we need to take. We need to first be able to understand the basic multiplication involved. Then we need to understand what a percent is, the meaning of a percent. We also then want to work with kind of a concept called for each 100. It's something that we'll explain later. And then the last step for percentages is applying all of this stuff that we've just learned to more advanced problems to help us in these situations that Katie just described.
So let's take the word percent and look at the meaning of it. So percent comes from the Latin per centum. The Latin word centum means 100. For example, a century is 100 years. So if we break that word into two, per and cent, per, for each, and then cent, 100. So that's kind of that first step that we're going to be looking at and really having an understanding of percents. So this first step we want to look at is for each 100. After having an understanding of basic multiplication, solving percent problems is painless and easy. So if we take a look at example 6% of 700, first thing we can look at is we have that 100 block in front of us. Let's think of it in 6% of 100. So if we have 6 of those blocks filled in, we will get 6% of 100 is 6. So now what we can do is we can take each of those 6 100s and applying it to 7 of those 100 blocks. So if we fill in each of those for 6, that'll help us have a better understanding of what 6% of 700 is. So as you can see here, we took the 6 blocks in each of the 100s and adding them all together. So we can do 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6 to equal 42, or we can do 6 times 7, which equals 42. So now what we would like for you guys to do is try this one. So 3% of 400. Take a minute to look at the different 100 blocks that we have. Let's start with something that's a little bit easier, where we started off by finding 3% of 100 and then 3% of 400. Awesome. So Roy, can you explain to us how we solve this problem?
Of course. So remember, like Katie said with our hints, the first thing we need to do is figure out what 3% of 100 is. And in that case, we know that 3% of 100 is 3. So once we know what 3% of 100 is, we just do that 4 times. So we're going to count 3 4 times, and we're going to do 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3, or 3 times 4. And like everybody in the chat so correctly said, 3 times 4 is 12. So that's how we get to our answer for that.
Excellent job, guys. Did you guys know that percents can be written the same forward as backwards? So 6% of 700 is also the same as saying 700% of 6.
So now that we understand the percents for each 100, let's try to solve a problem that's a little bit more complex. So what we know so far when we're trying to solve 6% of 750 is what 6% of 100 is. It's 6. So the next step we need to figure out, just like we did in the last example, is figure out what 6% of 700 is. 6 times 7 is 42. So 6% of 700 is going to be 42.
But Roy, what about the 50 portion of the 750?
That's where it gets a little tricky, Katie. We really want to make sure that we pay attention to that too, because we can't just forget about it. So what we know, based on what you just told us, is that 6% of 50 is going to be the same as 50% of 6. And we know that half of 6 is what? It is 3. So the way we use that 3 is we just add that to the 42 we just got. And then we get our math problem right here. It's just 6 times 7, and then we plus 3 to that. That's going to be 45. So now we've got one for you guys to try. Why don't you go ahead and try and tell me what 3% of 350 is? Remember, whenever we have a number that's for each 100, we then need to find the part that's not the whole 100, and that's the 50.
So just like before, when we had the 3% of, if we were to do 300% of 100 first, we would know that that would be 3. And then if we did 3% of 300, we got 9. Now we've got that 50. Just like we did in the previous one, we want to take half of 3, which is 1.5. So we can add those numbers together. So 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 1.5, and get our answer of 10.5. So 9 plus 1.5. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit more of an advanced problem similar to the other one, but we're going to do 8% of 225. So we already know that 8% of 100 equals 8. And that 8% of 200 is just saying 8 times 2 equals 16. But Roy, I'm having a little difficulty. How do we find the 25% of the 25 of the 225?
So very similar to how we found the 50, we know that 50 is going to be half of 100. And we know that 25 is half of 50, so we just need to take half twice. Right, guys? So 8% of 25 is going to turn out to be 2, because we take 8% of 100, which is 8, cut it in half, which is 4, and then we cut it half again to get 2.
So now we can take the 8% of 200 and the 8% of 25, so the 16 and the 2, and add together to get 18.
So now we're going to do some even more advanced percent problems. So now, if we ever approach with a problem that's like, what's 23% of 192? We need to start working with decimals now. Decimals, as you guys have probably learned, is how we separate numbers by base 10. So numbers on the left of the decimal are typically going to be bigger, and numbers on the right of the decimal are going to get much smaller. So before we start figuring out what this answer is, we need to first turn our percentage into a decimal. And in any case with percentages, we want to write the number out, and then we just move the decimal to the left 2 times. We've got an example for you here. All we do is we write out 23.00, and then we just move it 2 times. So 23% is the same as 0.23. And now that we know what our decimal is, 0.23, we can do some decimal multiplication to find the answer here. One thing I like to remind everybody and all my students is make sure you line everything up, because it's very, very easy to get things a little shifted here. So we like to make sure everything is neatly lined up. So what we find that 23% of 192 is going to be 44.16, or 44 1600ths.
So let's try this one. 12% of 172. Just a reminder, don't forget to change the percent into a decimal before multiplying. So go ahead and take a moment to try and solve this one. All right, so let's take a look at this one. So 12% of 172.
So remember, guys, we have to keep everything nice and lined up when we do our decimal multiplication. But before we do our decimal multiplication, we have to find what the percentage is of the decimal. So remember, we move it 2 places and we get 0.12 or 12 hundredths, and then we multiply. And as you guys can see, once we get our answers there, we add them up and get our final answer, which is 20.64 or 20 and 64 hundredths. Great job, guys. We now have another problem for you guys that's a little even more advanced. Now we're going to take everything we've learned and apply it to this question. So you and some friends are out shopping for a pool float. You find one in the sales section. The pool float costs $12, but it's 20% off. How much does a pool float cost after you've taken that 20% off?
So we're trying to find that pool float is 20% off. So we've got that $12. So let's convert that 20% into a decimal. So as we do that, the decimal of 20% is 0.20. So we can take that 12 and multiply it by that decimal, the percentage, to get $2.40. But we're not done there just yet, because that is how much we're removing from that initial cost of $12. So there's one extra step we have to do in this process. So now we have to take those $12 and subtract the discounted amount, which is $2.40, to get a total of $9.60. Just make sure you guys are lining your decimals up and carrying the numbers over and borrowing correctly.
And we thought we'd leave you guys one last thing about percentages. Just a very useful thing is that we can turn percentages into fractions. It's very, very useful. Not many examples that you can really point out, but it's a useful thing that you need to know. So we're going to take 48% and turn that into a fraction. The very first step we're going to do is we're going to put that 48 over 100 and then reduce fractions. If you know how to reduce fractions, you spot that those have 4 in common, and we're going to divide both of those by 4 to get 12 over 25.
So the last little thing that we want to send you guys off with today is some practice for the road. We have given you guys 3 problems under easy, medium, and hard. And what we would like for you guys to do is write these down and check your answers in comparison to the results on our Instagram and our Facebook. Feel free to comment your answers on there, and we'll show you step by step on our social media on how to solve those. We will go ahead and take any questions you might have.
I have a question for y'all to talk about. So earlier in the answers, I noticed that some people were putting their answer as with a percent as well. So they said 6% of 750 was 45%. Can y'all talk a little bit about why the answer itself is not a percent?
The reason why the answer wouldn't be 45% is because the percent symbol is almost like a math operation. When you want to say 3 times 4, you don't say that the answer is going to be 12 times. It's very similar to that. So when we have the percent symbol and I say 8% of 100, that percent is like the symbol in the equation. So 8% of 100 is just going to be 8, because your answer isn't going to have the operation in it, just like when I said multiplication.
Also have a question about Mathnasium. Someone said, how or where can I reach you? This is really cool, and my child really doesn't like math.
You're more than welcome to visit the social media information that is provided below. And you're also welcome to visit our website. If you go to mathnasium.com, we can happy to answer any of the questions you have, and we can provide you with contact information for a center that's nearby you as well.
Very good. I see some people asking about our online options, or if we have an online option. Yes, we are doing online. We do offer an online platform. It's called Mathnasium at Home, and it's essentially the same visit that you're going to get in center. So we do offer that online distant learning option for you guys.
I have a question. I like this one. So someone's asking, is it fun?
Of course it is. Our main goal is to make math fun. We have a lot of different unique ways that we introduce math to students, and in the end, it helps them have a better understanding of math. We have a lot of different activities that we do in the center that are not always math related, but we have like reward cabinet, we have different activities of the day, the question of the day, but then our instruction is always very energetic, and we're always looking to have a lot of fun in the centers as well as on our online platform.
We're also currently offering virtual game nights or math nights at some of our centers. So if you live near one of our centers, please reach out and we can hook you up with some information about that. I have another question. Can we do lessons in the building and not on Zoom?
Our online platform is not through Zoom. We have a specific platform that we use that is Not this one specifically. So we would be happy to show you that one. Some of our centers have returned to in-center. If you would like to reach out to that specific location near you, they'd be happy to provide you with more information.
And another question, for how long will virtual continue?
With us specifically, it's going to continue long term. It is not going away. At home has been a wonderful addition to Mathnasium, and it'll coincide with our in-center option, and our families will have a choice between one or the other.
So I have a question, do you still get candy? Asking the important questions.
Yeah. Right now we are giving out the candy for certain days and activities. We do just ask that you take it home and enjoy it at home, but we are still giving out our candy in center.
And then I have a question, is online one-on-one or group?
It is in a group setting on an individual basis. So our instructor could be working with up to 4 students, but when the instructor is working with your student or you specifically, it is individualized. So it's just you and the instructor at that point.
Okay, and we'll gladly hang out and answer more questions, but I know I've seen a few people kind of dropping out since we're done with the overall presentation. So thank you everybody that came. Thank you, Roy and Katie, for this presentation. And I hope that everybody got something useful from it. And we'll just hang out. I see more questions coming in, so we'll hang out and answer questions as long as y'all have them. So another question about the online teaching. Do the other students see you?
With online instruction, they do not. The instructor can go through the different breakout rooms and see the individual students, but the students themselves cannot see the other one except for in the lobby in a chat option that we have. But you will not physically see the other students, but you will physically see your instructor.
So do we have another good question. Do they use papers and binder for online?
We do not have physical binders that we send home with our students for the online system. It is all in front of them on the computer screen. Most of our students do end up having a notebook and pencil next to them to do scratch work on it. In center, we do binders and paper, but online it is all on the computer screen. So that way you don't have to worry about misplacing any of that work.
Can they do extra homework?
We typically don't send homework home with our students. However, we do allow the students to spend up to half their visits working on that homework if you have it from there. But we traditionally don't send homework home with our students because we'd rather be responsible for their math completely in center and not have to worry about outside of center factors affecting their math learning.
If you're looking for extra work for your student to do outside of the center, you are welcome to check out our home office Facebook page, which has lessons kind of like this that they offer every weekday. So facebook.com/mathnasium/live. And then on our social medias, we also post like riddles and questions of the day and problems all the time that they could work on at home. Okay, another question we have is, do students get to play games as a group or math games?
We occasionally do activities where they are in group settings. Right now, just with everything, we are encouraging our students not to do that in center, but we sometimes will do different activities where they will be able to interact with other students. Our math nights is a great example of that. That is something that we do outside of our center, but it is an opportunity for students to interact with their peers and play some really fun math games.
So just to clarify, because the same person followed up with another question. With our online sessions, we don't play games in the session most of the time, but like Katie said, that the virtual math nights and game nights, that's a good way to play games. So there have been a lot of good questions this time. I've been kept really busy.